240 cows in lactation. We are talking about an average of 39.3 liters per cow. Look here, the bedding is always very, very well maintained. This here is the diet for the dry cows, a lot of wheat straw. There's a lot of leaves contained in this hay. The protein, the gold of the matter, is here. The hay here is placed at the disposal of the lactating animals. And then we get to the part where the knives must always be kept sharp or replaced.
Welcome everyone to the Santa Fe Agro Institute channel, and we are here in Italy with Julio. We made an excellent video on this farm that you're going to watch now. It was a great exchange of experiences where Mr. Italo introduced us to the farm, talked about management, and shared all his experience so far with dairy cattle production. I hope that you, watching from the other side, enjoy it, have fun, and start this video by hitting the like button, leaving your thumbs up for this video. Leave us a comment too, telling us what we need to improve, what you think of our videos, and subscribe to our channel, alright? Julio, say hello to the crowd.
Let's go, everyone. Let's watch this video that has a lot of good stuff, a lot of great content for us to share the experience of milk production here in Italy. Let's go. This is also a farm that produces Parmigiano Reggiano, so all the milk produced here is destined for the production of Parmigiano Reggiano, and obviously the entire farm adheres to the guidelines from the consortium for producing this cheese. 240 cows in lactation. The average milk yield per cow is 12,000 liters per lactation, adjusted to 305 days. So we are talking about an average of 39.3 liters per cow. They don't have very high lactation peaks, but they do have a great lactation persistence. Mr. Italo mentioned that to achieve this persistence, the work here is primarily focused on three pillars: environment, genetics, and nutrition. Mr. Italo has been working for decades on selecting animals with a focus on milk solids and lactation persistence. And that's how we've reached the averages we have today. In winter, the yield reaches 44 or 45 liters of milk, while in the summer, with heat peaks, it drops to 38.5. In 1997, they transitioned from producing milk for general consumption to producing milk for the Parmigiano Reggiano industry. At that time, Mr. Italo asked himself, what type of milk does Parmigiano Reggiano need? Well, Parmigiano Reggiano requires solids. It doesn't care about transporting water, so it's essential to maintain the fat content. But the fat also works well with the hay and everything related to physically effective fiber in the diet. Protein is another factor besides controlling the diet. There's a significant focus on genetic selection. There has been a strong genetic selection pressure for casein production within the system, and the result we see today is that the bonus payment for quality alone is enough to cover all the labor costs on the farm. In 1989, they managed to reach an average of 10,000 liters of milk per cow with 2.90% protein. Exactly, not much cheese. So today's production on this day is 38.5 liters with an annual average of 39.5, always above 4% fat and over 3.7% milk protein. This is crucial with cows producing 12,000 liters, above 2.9% casein, which is an amazing figure, from 2.9% protein to 2.9% casein. They have a bonus of 0.08 euros per liter of milk just for the quality of protein and fat produced on this farm, which is significant. 3 years ago, the milking parlor was renovated. 243 cows are being milked today. It's a 10 by 10 system, and they managed to complete the milking in 3 hours. Pre-dipping is always done with regular foam, and post-dipping is automated, so it works faster. After post-dipping, each set is washed and disinfected for each cow, and then the group is washed, allowing control between animals to prevent infection. Mr. Italo was commenting, so, what kind of technology do we have here? The first thing is the lactometer, which gives the fat content, protein, and conductivity of the milk for each cow. It doesn't give somatic cells, but it measures the milk conductivity. Conductivity is capable of informing you, and when there's a change, it can alert you to a potential case of mastitis. With that, you already have an idea of which animal to check. The system can recognize each cow as it enters, know which cow it is, and how much milk that cow produced at that moment. Mr. Italo mentioned that it is extremely accurate, with only a slight difference from the reading in the tank. When you pool the data, you see at most a difference of 1 or 2 liters of milk. Very, very precise. Milking is done twice a day, and when the data is transferred to the computer, it tells you if there was any difference from the expected production of that animal. Milking is always done twice, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and the afternoon milk goes to the dairy, where it rests in large vats. Then the evening milk, after skimming, is added to the morning milk. This skimming process, which allows the cream to be used for butter and other products, also balances the casein and fat content to a ratio of around 1:1, which is what's key here. This is a particular aspect, which we will see later in feed production. As a rule for Parmigiano Reggiano, 50% of the feed must be hay throughout all stages of the animal's lactation. So, of course, you balance the rest accordingly. In general, 50% of the diet must be hay. Here, on this specific farm, they managed to feed 40% concentrate and 60% forage. Does that reduce production? No, because the forage is of such high quality that the cows don't even notice. There's no problem with reduced dry matter intake. And the forage is simply of exceptional quality. And we will see this later. They also have a waiting area with both fans and a sprinkler system for cooling. There was an issue with cows slipping in the waiting area, so they installed a rubber mat. Generally, this rubber mat, as I had learned previously, costs around 35 euros to 40 euros per square meter, and it solved the problem. We were here in the milking parlor, and this is the stall for cows that have just calved or have had some issue. So you can see that the cows barely have to walk to get to the milking area. And of course, since this is very close by in an area where people walk a lot, anyone passing by can observe if there's any problem. It's very interesting to have this area so close to the milking zone. Very well, right? And take a look here. The bedding is always very well maintained. Not only is there straw on the bedding, but there's always extra care to place straw even where the tractor would pass through to scrape later. We always see this layer of straw here on this farm, which helps with both cleanliness and the comfort and safety of the animals as they walk. For example, if something happens and a cow can't get up in just an hour or so, you can easily remove the straw and solve the problem. Mr. Italo mentioned that all the cows here have a pedometer, which, besides identifying each animal, measures how many steps the cow takes throughout the day. Mr. Italo is someone who always pays close attention to the data generated by the computer. He says, well, sometimes I move a cow to a different group, and of course the cow walks more, or if it gets startled, it will show more activity. Also, when there's a hierarchy dispute, you'll see a higher number of steps during the day. So, I check, and the computer tells me there are 10 cows in heat. But in reality, there are only 2. The others were affected by a change in management or some other interference. So it's crucial to be aware that the data the computer provides also needs proper interpretation. Something else that Mr. Italo was commenting on, it's really interesting to observe how well the basics are done here. They don't use synthetic mattresses or anything like that. Instead, they use sand bed with straw on top, and the straw is well maintained. Every morning, while the cows are being milked, the dirty part is removed. Not the whole bed, just the back section. ensuring both comfort and cleanliness. So you'll see that none of the cows have hock problems, precisely because they have such great comfort and cleanliness. First lactation cows produce 53 liters of milk per day, 80 to 90 days post-calving. First lactation cows are still producing 52 liters of milk. In the morning, they produce about 27 or 28 liters, and in the afternoon, around 23 or 24. Mr. Italo commented, "When the milkman comes here, he says, I like coming here because I see that the cows are content and happy, which reflects the comfort and care they have for the animals." This building we're looking at now was the freestall barn for lactating cows, right? It was built in 1934. We can see the difference between this and today's freestalls because at the time, there was this idea that cows would get cold in the winter. So you can see how much more enclosed this facility is compared to the freestalls we have today, right? And what happened? Well, the business grew, and we now have other facilities that we'll see later. So today, this barn is used for calves and heifers. Weaning happens at 70 to 80 days, and the animals we see here have just moved out of their individual pens. Here's something interesting. This was also built following the freestall system for the beds. So you can see that they already have their individual separations. And why is that? They learned this from a young age. So when they transition to being heifers and then lactating cows, there's no issue with cows lying down in the feeding alley. They are already used to going to the bedding area. Mr. Italo mentions that they learned from experience. Once, when many animals were born at the same time, they had to leave some animals outside, 12 calves. And these calves, who didn't have access to the facility with the divided beds and all the features of a freestall, ended up with half of them lying down only in the feeding alley. These animals would get dirty, which led to issues like mastitis. He says it took a long time to train these animals to go to the freestall bedding. After that lesson, they made sure that all the animals, even from a young age, learned to use this system with individual separators, just like the lactating cows. No space was spared. A lot was invested in ensuring animal comfort. He says we left plenty of space, and I'll give you the exact numbers later. What happens is that you can house both first lactation and multi-paris cows together, and there's no issue with competition. There's plenty of space in the feed bunk, the stocking density never reaches 100%, and there's enough room in the feeding alley. A lot happens here. This facility was initially built for lactating cows, but as the business expanded, it's now used for raising heifers too. They noticed that this system with individual separators, where we're talking about lactating cows that weigh around 750 kilograms, had an issue where the cows would lie down under the separator and have some difficulty getting up. So they switched to a system with just a single iron bar, and he says that solved the problem, and we kept the original setup for the smaller animals, the heifers, who do just fine. There's no problem with them. It was an adaptation made when designing the new facility differently. When a calf is born here, it's weighed, all the procedures are followed, the navel is disinfected, and so on. They use individual pens for the calves where they stay until they are 70 to 80 days old when they are weaned. And of course, after each use, everything is disinfected and cleaned to welcome a new animal. Now let's take a look at the width of the feeding alley, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 meters here in the feeding alley, and in the back it's 4. Whereas in most freestalls, the feeding alley is 3 meters at the back and 3.5 meters for the feeding area. Here we have 6 meters. So space was one thing that, as Italo said, we didn't skimp on, specifically to ensure comfort. Also, in the passages from the feeding alley to the back area where the beds are, there's a large space where the cows also have access to a water trough. This allows a cow drinking water to be passed by 2 other cows without any issues of pushing or crowding. A lot of emphasis was placed on space and animal comfort here in this freestall. So this is the diet for dry cows. A lot of wheat straw, and since we're in the Parmigiano Reggiano region, there's no silage. What do we observe? For dry cows, you don't have as much trouble with selection and so on, so there's a management benefit that allows you to treat these animals every 2 or 3 days because this diet contains about 87% dry matter. We can also see the construction of the beds here, similar to the lactation groups with straw bedding. There's a layer of sand with straw on top, and the animals are very comfortable. No issues with hocks or cleanliness. It's simply impeccable. The use of straw on the paths, whether on the feeding alleys or outside the beds, helps in 2 ways. First, it provides safety for the animals when walking, and second, it's later used as fertilizer for the fields. Since there's not much liquid production, you can mix it in when cleaning, creating a product that's much easier to spread without needing to distribute liquid as often. This helps a lot. Regarding the diet, once again, this is the typical Parmigiano Reggiano diet. 7 to 8 kilograms of alfalfa hay, which is of very high quality. We'll see later why this hay is of such high quality. This year has been a bit unusual because we had many rainy days, which reduced the wheat hay production during the harvest season. As a result, we may need to increase the amount of alfalfa hay slightly, adding a bit more straw. We have plenty of straw available, so it won't be an issue. Since alfalfa is highly digestible, you can increase the amount of straw. Currently, we use about 1 to 1.5 kilograms of wheat straw. But since there's plenty of straw available and we're using a higher amount of high-quality feed, we can increase it to 2 kilograms of straw, which solves the rumination issue. Since there's strong selection for lactation persistence, all the animals have similar production levels, with little variation between them. There are 2 groups here because of the way the facility is built. I asked him what criteria they used to separate the groups, and he said none. The animals are very similar, and the diet is always the same. So they are only separated for milking, but there's no specific criteria for separating the animals into different groups. Something interesting to consider is the hay provided for lactating animals. The diet is rich in hay, about 60% forage and 40% concentrate, with 7 to 8 kilograms of alfalfa hay, which has very high digestibility. To prevent selection, the material is chopped very short. Let me show you. The material here is chopped very short to prevent selection. How short? The portion on the top sieve, the upper sieve of the pin state separator, the 19 millimeters one, should generally be less than 8%. What remains on the sieve should be less than 2.5 centimeters, typically between 2 to 2.5 centimeters. That way, you avoid any selection. Julio, but cutting it so short, doesn't that affect rumination? Well, we're working with a diet based on alfalfa, where half of the hay is alfalfa. We maintain a higher forage NDF content, around 22 to 23%, for lactating cows. Additionally, we provide first cut hay, which is this one here, known as long hay, which remains available. So, for animals that feel the need to consume more long hay, it's here at their disposal. Does this interfere with dry matter intake? That's a good question. And we've conducted research at the University of Bologna and found that it doesn't interfere. The animals tend to prefer the TMR. So only those that feel the need will come for the long hay, and they don't eat much of it. It also serves as a signal. If you notice that the animals are consuming more of this hay from one day to the next, it indicates that there's something wrong with the diet. Maybe a bale of hay with higher digestibility or longer mixing time in the feed wagon. These are all things that help you monitor the animal's rumination. One interesting point to mention is that salt mixed with bicarbonate is available, usually in a 1-to-1 ratio, and it works as a signal, just like long hay. So when there's increased consumption, we already know the animal may have a rumination issue or a sodium deficiency. There's a significant variation in sodium requirements from animal to animal. So those that need more sodium will come here to get it. You can also see in this freestall that we don't use a scraper. What happens? They say we don't see the need for a scraper because the cows go to the milking parlor twice a day. Twice a day, we bring in the tractor to clean the area, which is wide enough, and we open the gates to pass the tractor through. It works perfectly, so no scraper is needed. I was talking about the strengths of this freestall. One potential weakness might be energy sufficiency. He says regarding the manure, the mixture of straw and manure from cleaning, it's all used on the fields. In the past, there was a project to use it for biogas, but for management reasons, we opted not to do that. We sell part of the manure to a company that makes biogas, so we don't have any issues with handling it. As for energy sufficiency, we've just installed solar panels, and it will be more than enough. In fact, we'll even sell some of it back to the grid. I asked him how much chemical fertilizer they use here. He says we rarely need to use any, mainly because of the manure from the animals, which is already sufficient, and due to crop rotation. First, they plant alfalfa, which they use for 5 years. They are very careful with the soil, only bringing in tractors when it's really dry to avoid compacting the soil. After 5 years, they plant wheat for 1 year, then panicum for another year, and then they return to alfalfa. When working with diets high in hay, you generally have 2 options: either pre-grind the hay or leave it in the mixer for longer. But it's not just about leaving it in the mixer longer. You need good management of the mixer, and that's where sharp knives are crucial. Often we see mixers with knives that haven't been replaced or sharpened for years, and that's a critical point to watch. One of the byproducts that can be used here is beet pulp, which comes from Ravenna due to availability and price. You use whatever is possible and allowed within the Parmigiano Reggiano region. It's also common to use brewery residues, cottonseed, or other byproducts. Though some of these, like cottonseed, are not allowed for Parmigiano Reggiano production, they are widely used in surrounding areas when the price is right. And of course, since we are in Italy, wheat flour is a very common and affordable byproduct. So the main byproducts used here are beet pulp, wheat flour, and brewery residues when possible. Here is the panicum hay, which is very good, and here we can see the alfalfa. This farm has a drying system. Look at this. When you take the alfalfa and shake it, you can see the amount and proportion of leaves. When we shake it, look at how many leaves fall out. The amount of leaves in this hay is incredible. The protein, the gold of it all, is here. You might ask, Julio, how do they manage to maintain so many leaves in the alfalfa hay? Specifically on this farm, they have this drying system, which is now running, so we can't see it up close. But basically, it's an open space with a grill where they place the hay bales, which stay there for about 8 hours with hot air blowing from below. This dries the material. They have space for 48 bales, so they process 48 bales at a time for 8 hours, allowing for 3 cycles in a 24-hour period, drying around 150 alfalfa bales per day. This allows them to collect the hay greener and retain more leaves in the bales. Does this mean that places without a dryer can't retain the leaves in their hay? Not really. There will be slightly fewer leaves, but the technique is different. You need to remove the hay from the field when there's morning dew so that it isn't too dry, which would cause the leaves to fall off with any movement. There's a certain technique to it, but of course you can't go below 84 to 85% dry matter, or you risk mold, which is an important factor to consider.